Today, I want to talk about, how do I say this, one of the most taboo subjects in street photography. But before we do that, let me ask you, does this offend you? How about this? Oh, it's almost as if he never existed. That'll teach him for being in the frame. You see, there are two schools of thought when it comes to street photography. On the one hand, there are, shall we say, purists who see street photography as an accurate representation of life, whereby nothing can be edited nor manipulated. And then there are those, myself included, who believe that street photography can be whatever the shit. If you wanted to add an elephant riding a hot air balloon whizzing through the sky on fire, then that's your choice. Street photography is art. Street photography is the photographer's subjective interpretation of life, and therefore it should be viewed as such. So let me just break down today's video when and why you'd want to sort of manipulate your photos, because it doesn't always make sense to do so. The crux of this video, the whole point of this video really, is to talk about my personal thoughts on the ethics around editing and sort of manipulating street photography sort of images, and basically what street photography is, and ultimately why you shouldn't give a damn about what the crybaby street photography police have to say. The best way to remove distractions from your image is to not shoot them at all, is to sort of frame them up such that they're not in there, but sometimes it's just not possible. For example, in this photo, I really wanted to isolate this guy smoking the cigar, but he was going for a walk with his mate here, and I don't want to sort of interrupt the scene and tap him on the shoulder, hey, can I just get a photo of you on your own? It would have just changed the whole vibe, changed his pose, changed everything. He might have not said yes. So I was really hoping, I was following him for a good 10, 20, 30 meters maybe, but obviously they were going for a walk, they weren't going to separate, so I just had to take the shot anyway. I wanted just him on his own because the way that the smoke clouds that were coming out from his cigar kind of perfectly blended in with the clouds in the back, and obviously I didn't want his friend in the frame because that was taking away from that sort of little scene that was in front of me. I'm trying to keep the sun out of my eyes, alright? Give me a break. Not only did I remove his friend out of the image, but I also added a few more clouds because I really wanted to blend in the smoke clouds with the actual clouds in the sky. In my opinion, that just makes for a far more compelling, more impactful image. That's when and why you'd want to intentionally manipulate and sort of remove elements if it takes away from the story, shall we say, that you're trying to give. Obviously only do things if it makes sense, if it actually adds to the photo. But obviously there are also times where it doesn't make sense. If you do social sort of documentary style photos, or if you're like a photojournalist, then of course you wouldn't dare to manipulate the photo because your job is to record objective truth. But even then you could make the argument that photojournalism, social documentary is subjected to the photographer's bias, because at the end of the day, the photojournalist decides what goes in the frame and what doesn't. You see, I think there's like a total misconception that street photography is a true objective representation of life, because it's not. At the end of the day, it's art, and it should be viewed as such. If you, on the one hand, think that street photography should be an objective representation of life where nothing, where you're not allowed to manipulate the image in any sort of way, that's perfectly fine. You do you. I support you. You can do that. But at the same time, you don't get to impose your rules on someone else. I will admit it, I have not been shooting street photography for all that long. I've only shot it for maybe 2-3 years at the most. However, I've done it long enough now to know that there are times for strict boundaries and there are times for free, sort of loose, subjective interpretation. You see, I can't call myself a street photography expert. However, there is one aspect in my life where I can speak with a great deal of authority, and that is on strength training. I know it's a bit weird, why am I talking about strength training? But trust me, it'll make sense. The ironic thing about the experts within strength training is that they are the most open-minded out of all the voices in the field. Everything depends on your goals and the individual. There's no such thing as a perfect workout, a perfect food, a perfect rep range. And basically, one of the clearest and most obvious signs of someone who doesn't know what they're talking about in the fitness industry is when they demonize a certain workout or food without context. They just make blanket statements such as CrossFit is terrible, veganism is terrible, eating meat is cancerous, and veganism is the only way to live. Which, by the way, is all complete BS. I use these examples because I see these dogmatic, really narrow-minded, overly restricted ideas mirrored in street photography. You hear people saying stuff like, oh, street photography must be candid, it must not be edited, it must include faces, and not the backs of heads. Street photography must be black and white. Street photography has to be playing with light. It has to capture scenes. What that means. Let's be honest, most of these people are a minority, but they're so loud like that I think it's worth mentioning. And generally the type of people who say these things are, let's be frank, sorry to say, but they generally don't create anything. They don't share anything of their own work. Generally, they just don't really bring anything that valuable apart from kicking, screaming, crying to the community. I wonder if those people who say that street photography must be candid shots of faces would dare say that to, I don't know, Vivian Maya, who shot images like these. Or those who believe street photography must include people. Would they dare criticize Will Eggleston, who shot stuff like this? Would they dare tell Steve McCurry that he cannot edit his photos? Let's be real, they wouldn't dare. So don't think for a second that you need to bow down to these trolls. If you followed all these arbitrary, generic, and essentially meaningless rules that are only subscribed to by people who don't have anything worthwhile to share, then your work will look exactly that, generic. Whether street photography depicts reality or not can be disputed, but I would argue that it depicts the reality of the photographer. I love this quote because, again, it just takes on an open-minded approach towards street photography as a whole. I found it on James's blog as I was researching for this video. I never heard of him before. And it's just a sentiment that I've always felt, but never really knew how to verbalize. Street photography, it is a depiction of your reality, whether you like it or not. How you determine what stays in and what goes out of these sort of four walls is completely up to you. Whether you do it in camera or after you hit a shutter button, consciously or subconsciously, it still goes through your filter of subjective interpretation. I've always felt that photography in general, but more so than any other genre, street photography is really less about the subjects in the photos and more about the photographer themselves. For a lot of street photographers, it's I don't want to sound cheesy, but it really is a form of self-therapy. For me, it acts like a visual diary of whatever I was going through at that point in time. You know, the colors and motifs that I choose to capture is this is going to sound really cringe, but it's like an interpretation of my own struggles as I try to figure out who the hell I am. You know, what they specifically represent, I don't have a clue, but the act of street photography and the images I capture help me give purpose and structure to my everyday life. For me personally, street photography and strength training are like the only pursuits that have helped me make sense of these abstract struggles and emotions that I'm going through. For example, you know, I struggle to shoot wide scenes with a 24mm that I like, so I don't. However, zoning in on like a facial expression with an 85mm and blurring the shit out of the background has become almost second nature to me. Likewise, two of my favorite social media street photographers, if you will, are Shane Taylor and Josh K. Jackson. Shane Taylor has repeatedly cited his reason for starting street photography was to help him deal with anxiety. Josh Jackson's debut monograph is titled Sleepless in Soho. It's titled that because he was struggling with insomnia at the time whilst he was on the streets shooting for his photo book. And the point I'm trying to make here is that street photography doesn't have to reflect you. It doesn't have to personally reflect who you are on the inside. But if that's what you want to do, don't be afraid to. If that means getting rid of a distracting bystander because it takes away from the kissing couple in the foreground, then do it. So, do we need a definition at all? Of course we need a definition, because if anything can be street photography, then nothing is street photography, right? At the same time, we need to give ourselves room to be creative and sort of interpret the way we see it, the way we see life. As I said before, at the end of the day, street photography is art. In my opinion, I think we can all agree that so long as the image is taken out on the street, it's street photography. I think we can all agree that the method in which the image is made has to be standardized. You know, you taking a self-portrait in your room at home to stave off, you know, the impending sense of doom and depression brought on by the pandemic is not street photography. Street photography, as a title, should just be a guideline, and the rest should be up to you. Anyways guys, that is the video. I hope those fitness analogies weren't too confusing. For some reason I use strength training as a metaphor for a lot of things in my life, so that's just something you're gonna have to get used to if you do decide to subscribe and follow me on Instagram at Zain Photo. Some of you may have been expecting a different video, namely my 30 days of shooting black and white, but that's going to have to be for a later video, because as of posting this video, I'm only on like day 26, I think. So I've got a few more days to go. I hope you enjoyed this slightly more intellectual video. I quite like this sort of video essay sort of format. This video is very much inspired by Jamie Windsor. I just love his style. I'm trying to make more valuable content, as they say. Editing street photos is kind of daunting for some, so I'm just here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. You're still very special as you are if you choose to do so, and I love you all the same. In case you're not aware of the new upload schedule, I'm uploading a minimum of one video every 2 weeks, and it'll be on a Wednesday. Just remember that it's gonna happen on a Wednesday, all right? This way I put less pressure on myself, and I'll have the time and the energy to make better videos. Honestly, I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch these things, so it's the least I can do. Anyways guys, that's all I've got for you. Thank you for getting to the end. Keep learning, keep shooting, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.